You put out that book, well, not last year, not that long ago. The Prime Minister Who Stole Freedom. It was like a parody on the whole convoy affair and things like that. It was brilliant, and the graphics were fantastic. Illustration, I guess I should use the proper term for it. Of course, it was nice, poetic Dr. Seuss sort of style, and it did really well. So now you've done a new one, and it's come out a couple of weeks ago, I believe. One Face, Two Face, Black Face, Blue Face.
Yeah, we released the book last week, and it's been doing really good. Really positive response from people. A lot of people are saying they enjoy it more than How the Prime Minister Stole Freedom, and we're really working hard to kind of keep pushing out the political satire. As we move forward with our brand. I think that no matter which party is in power or whoever's kind of working behind the scenes, that we kind of focus on anybody being available to be in the crosshairs, so long as they're warranting that kind of attention.
Yeah, well, and putting things, I should note, actually, our goofy newfie there, I see Arthur Green noting what an awesome room you're in, and I remember that from the last time you were on the show. It's quite a background you got going on there. You draw a lot of envy from that, along with your fine work in political parody and satire.
Thank you. We actually built this room for my kids during the lockdowns because they started to get a real interest in retro gaming. And, I'm really into preserving the 80s and 90s lifestyle that I grew up in, that I kind of said to my wife, if we can afford it, let's do it. And, I always joke that this is for the kids, but it's for the whole family. And we have a blast down here. I know it's the envy of a lot of families when they come over with their kids, but we've made a lot of friends, needless to say.
Well, and I'll get you back to your book because you made a lot of friends there. And I like, I think we kind of talked about that last time. Political communication. I write big, long, drawn out columns and people read them and it's great. And then there's lots of big, thick books. But at other times, there's a role for all sorts of ways to communicate and bringing people's interest to it, bringing their interest to the issues. And this is a fun way to do, which is still serious messaging. It's a different way to communicate. Satire is very important. Parody is important, even from the old CBC air farce or This Hour Has 22 Minutes, as much as I don't care for that network, they held a role, and as do your books. Like, you've got serious messaging packed within a good humorous package.
Well, we try to keep it simple. And what I find is that on the political spectrum, when it comes to comedy, I think that you kind of only see comedy on one side of the scale when it comes to publications these days. And that's why when we first did How the Prime Minister Stole Freedom, our focus was, let's start bringing comedy to another angle and make it simple enough that people who have forgotten to laugh over the last couple of years can look at something that really was a big movement in Canada, not only in the country, but for the world, and kind of find some humor in it. And we'll poke fun at the gaffes at those who deserve it the most, and kind of take the gloves off, which is essentially what we've done in the second book. We had a lot of people reach out to us when the first book went viral saying, can you do Jagmeet next? Can you do Chrystia Freeland? Can you do Omar? And I kind of just said, instead of finding one person, why don't we just do them all? Let's put them all in one book and kind of take the gloves off, so to speak. So that's kind of what we wanted to do, was focus the comedy on the one side of the scale that you normally don't see it on.
Yeah, there's something to be said. It's a balance. Hey, I think it's fine when there's comedy poking fun at conservatives too, but you need both ends of the scale. And so the graphics of the transportation minister, for example, were great, but he is kind of a comical looking fellow to begin with, and that's okay. We all have our moments, somebody could draw a cartoon and make fun of my gray hair stuffing all over the place or whatnot. It's just
absolutely.
It's serious messaging, but it's not necessarily a cruel shot by any means. We're just having fun. I noticed there's a lot more text, though. This book, you went a little more in depth, I think, in it than the first one, where you went more for the short-hitting poetic. And there's a little more depth this time.
It was, well, the first one, again, was almost like a parody of The Grinch, which is the way we wrote it out, to kind of match the text and format of that book. We wanted to keep the Dr. Seuss parody-like nature to these books. And when it came time to write our second book, we followed along on the One Fish, Two Fish books that came up from Dr. Seuss. But I've noticed a lot of Dr. Seuss books, aside from a small handful, they're mostly about rhyming and about, they don't really have a purpose of a story. So when we wrote this book, I kind of said, we want to have some of that text in there to really get across our point of the comedy, of what we want to convey, the jokes and the gaffes, and to really try and land them all into one small book and give everybody the justice they deserve in terms of being knocked for the slip ups they've had over their time in office. So it was definitely a challenge, and it'll be a challenge going forward with our future books. We have another book coming out in February in time for the 1 year anniversary of the convoy, and it's going to be called Hold the Line, the Ballad of Tamara Leach. And we've actually gained permission from Tamara to use her name and likeness in the book, and I'm really looking forward to bringing that one to everybody in February, and that's going to be a little more rich text as well.
Yes, you got ahead of me. I wanted to talk about that with you moving on
Sure.
too. I mean, there's been a person, again, I wouldn't say unsung. I think lots of people have been certainly giving Tamara credit, due where it is. I mean, she was never anybody, people who knew her before the convoy and that. I mean, she was politically active, but she didn't expect or plan or want to be in the middle of all this, but she took on the role and stuck with it and went with it kind of where it carried her. And now she paid a terrible price. She was imprisoned for a long time, repeatedly, and is still facing these charges. So I think it's fantastic. You're going to give it, some coverage from a point of view, again, that doesn't have to be a dry editorial, but it's still an important book.
Yeah, I've been very fortunate over the last few months with the success of the first book to not only make very good friends with Tamara, but also with people in the political business and political realm. I was recently in Ottawa a few weeks ago for the Emergency Act Commission for support to Tamara, to sit with her and kind of just, be there for support for what she's going through. The government's taken away her voice and silenced her out of embarrassment for the way they've handled things. If you've been following the POEC at all, you'll notice that they really haven't done much to present a case for the Emergencies Act or for invoking the act. And it's really hard, not only for myself to sit there as a citizen, but to look at somebody as Tamara and say, this is somebody who was locked away in jail for longer than her charges would have kept her in jail for had she have been convicted. She's not allowed on social media. She's not allowed to, do anything in terms of talking to people or socializing anywhere or accepting awards, or she'll get locked up again. It's tough. It's really tough to watch somebody go through that, because they say she's free, but it's like being in jail every single day. And hopefully justice is served when all this is done. I know her case is ongoing. And as a friend, I definitely stand by and support everything she's going through, and can honestly say she's one of the nicest, kindest people I've ever had the pleasure of meeting. And I really can't understand the prosecution that's going ahead on her.
No, and I've had people email me too, say, why haven't you had her on the show? Not everybody follows things that closely. Look, I would desperately love to have Tamara on the show. I can't, for her sake. She cannot do that. She will be thrown back into the remand center if she dares start talking on media. She can't do it. The moment she's free to, I'm going to be sending emails and nagging her, hey, get on there. We've got to talk. And
it's funny you say that, because when I was in Ottawa, like, her lawyers, where she stays is a few blocks from where the commission is being held. But there's actually a boundary in Ottawa where she is not allowed to go. Everywhere she goes, her lawyers must walk with her. There was an incident, I know she mentioned it during her testimony, but while I was there was an incident. She was outside having a cigarette on the sidewalk, and there's people actively watching where she's sitting, that they've called the police and said, oh, she's outside without legal representation. And the police have come by and said, if you were 3 inches more over in this direction, we would have had to take you to jail. And her lawyers literally have to follow her around like they're attached to her and grafted to her. And I look at that and go, it's just unfair treatment. There are some who didn't get charged. I've met a very large handful of convoy organizers at my time in Ottawa, and again online and through this experience with our books. And I've kind of always said at one point, not that they should have been charged as well, but it's a one or all thing. I think if you're going to charge one, you need to charge them all. There were some who weren't charged. There were some who now can put out books, who can go online and have their podcasts and do whatever they want to do, while others are silenced and damned just to make, an example out of them, which I just don't agree with at the end of the day.
Yeah, well, and it was, whether people want to admit it or not, it was an organic movement. It came out of nowhere. Nobody planned this 6 months in advance or really had a solid structure or anything of that to us. And that's why there's a number of people who did get charged. Some of them are more sympathetic people than others, I guess you could say, in the public sphere. And I believe that's part of why Tamara, though they fear and loathe her so much from the prosecution standpoint, is because she's the most frightening. Because when you listen to Tamara, when you talk to Tamara, like I have spoken to her before, I just can't have her on the show. she's not crazy. She's not a screaming extremist. She's not looking to make trouble or hurt anybody. And people realize that the more they see of her, the more they understand of her. She isn't a monster. Whether you agree with what the convoy was or not, they realize that this prosecution is absurd. It's way too much for somebody who's really not presenting a harm to society.
Absolutely. I fully agree. I've said from day one that I take the same stance as Pierre Poilievre did during the convoy, that I support legal protest. I support those who come legally to voice their concerns legally, and those who commit illegal actions should be charged and held to a high standard of those actions. And when it comes to people like Tamara, I mean, anybody who's been a critic of her, I simply say it's a shame you don't have time to sit down with her and have a conversation, because after 5 minutes, you'd sit questioning yourself. How can anybody do anything? I don't think she has a diabolical bone in her body.
No. And like I said, I haven't spoken to her on the phone since the convoy, but I had a good conversation back when she was with the Maverick and trying to organize that. And, again, people would say, oh, that's a party that's out there. Okay, fine. But they weren't hurting anybody. And she was genuine and rational. So you're getting back to that with your next book. It'll give, I guess, another platform to just be able to explain herself. Somebody who's been so demonized and such vitriol has been directed at her, just to help get her message out there.
Well, I really want to get her message out, but at the same time, show Canadians that she was speaking for all of us. This wasn't just her or a group of truck drivers. This was her saying, this is the voice Canada needs, and this is the voice that Canada should have, no matter what side of the spectrum you're on, whether you vote for the left, the right, the middle. Your rights at the end of the day are your rights, and she would be fully supportive of anybody's rights to protest. And that's kind of the point we wanted to move on to with her story. And I know as we go on to future books, we're maybe going to try to drift a little bit out of the political realm and kind of just stay in comedy and satire, and from time to time dip back in. We don't want to put ourselves in a box, but this was a story I felt was really necessary, and also that should be out in time for the 1-year anniversary of the convoy.
Yeah, well, and so with your books, obviously you're going to be doing more. They've been a good success. It's kind of turning into a series. Let's get on to where can people get your books, Derek?
Currently, people can find them on Amazon, both digitally and physically. We're still working with multiple publishers to try and find a way to get them into retail. Unfortunately, because of their content, even though it isn't crude or obnoxious, because it criticizes the government, a lot of retailers don't want to carry these books. And I know there's a lot of people out there that really just don't want to support Amazon for multiple reasons. And I've said, we're working, we'll keep people posted. But as for right now, they can find them on Amazon. And I believe they have it on sale for Black Friday. So people want to save a few dollars, now's the time to grab a copy.
Oh, and that's good. I mean, it's a great time, though, where the booksellers kind of all contracted. It's been happening for a long, long time. I mean, even back in the 90s when I'd buy lots of books, it was Coles or Chapters. There was really only a handful, only a small amount of independent booksellers, and they had a limited amount. And if you were an author and you couldn't get into those booksellers, well, you're out of luck. I mean, unless you're going to knock on doors and sell them, you couldn't do so. Look at it today, though. You're on Amazon. It can be found. Your book, despite those retailers, can reach a wide number of people across the country or even outside of the country. Have you had much actually for foreign sales now, come to think of it? Or
we've seen a ton in foreign sales off the first book, not so much this time. And I think a lot of it is just us slow to the plate as to getting promotion out and things like that. But I think the first book did very well in Australia. We had sales in the Netherlands, in Eastern Europe, Japan. We've seen some sales, a lot of United States sales as well. So we're kind of being bought up all over the world, and people are just enjoying the books. And at the end of the day, that was the purpose of them, was just for people to smile, have a laugh, and be entertained at a low price. And that's what we want to keep doing going forward.
Excellent. So the easiest way to find the newest one, I imagine, is if you just go to Amazon and search for One Face, Two Face, Black Face, Blue Face. It should bring you right to it, I imagine.
Correct. Yeah. If you even search for How the Prime Minister Stole Freedom, I believe if people click on my author name, it'll take them to all of our books. So they'll be able to find it, no problem.
And you're active on Twitter as well. We might as well get that out there. What's your Twitter handle if people want to get you there?
I am. Because of the letter, the character Max on there, it's under Unaccept Fringe. And people can find us under there because those Unacceptable Fringe is the name of our company that we make our books under. So people can find me at Unaccept Fringe. They can also find me on YouTube at Unacceptable Fringe, where I occasionally post some videos and content, when I'm not dealing with a family full of sick children with the flu. And I try to get my point out if people want to see me on the other side of books and kind of get my political grifts.
Excellent. Well, I thank you for your work on the books and for coming on to talk about it. I really hope they continue to take off, and I'm looking forward to watching them keeping coming out.
Thanks so much, Corey, and thanks again for having me. It was my pleasure to be here.
Here's an update on commodity prices around Lethbridge for today. Cash barley is trading at $4.50, feed wheat at $4.64, and corn is higher at $4.59 per ton. In the milling wheat markets, December Minneapolis futures slipped 1 1/4 cents at $9.50, with local hard red spring bid for December movement at $11.75 per bushel. Moving on to canola, January futures jumped $21.50 at $839.30 per ton, with delivered buys for January movement at $18.80 per bushel. In the pulse markets, nearby red lentil prices remain at 33 cents per pound, and yellow peas are trading at $12.75 per bushel. And in the cattle markets, December live cattle are higher 12.5 cents at $152.70 per hundredweight. For more information on pricing or picked up options, give me a call at 403-394-1711. I'm Matt Musicum at Marketplace Commodities. Accurate real-time marketing information and pricing options.
Canadian Shooting Sports Association. Without the CSSA, our gun rights would have been taken long ago. These guys are on the front lines helping to draft smart and intelligent firearms regulations and legislation in Canada, and more importantly, educating the public about how we keep guns out of the hands of the wrong people. To become a member, it's absolutely worth every penny. You can become a Western Standard member for just $10 a month or $99 a year for unlimited access.